Just in case you missed a lot today, we talked about one of the craziest things that ever happened in the Bible, one of the things that makes absolutely no sense. And if you were able to actually conceptualize what happened in Numbers 11, then you yourself may begin to question this book. But for those of us who already question this book, it's just more information as to why we have walked away from this book. So what is one of those things that we talked about? Oh, please go and read Numbers 11, because I don't want to hear anything about somebody saying you take it out of context, because it's out of context. But here's the brief idea of what happened in Exodus 11. So basically, you got your Israelites. They scrolling through the wilderness and everything, and the Israelite people start complaining. They say, "Well, damn, we're tired of eating manna. We want to eat some meat. Why we ain't eating no meat? We tired of eating manna." Now, most archaeologists and scientists believe that manna quite possibly could be insect poo-poo that they then gathered up and made into some bread, some cornmeal, and and ate it, and that's what they was eating. Now it's weird. They left Egypt with all kind of cows and sheep and goat and all these other animals that they walked out of Egypt with. They previous chapters and books, they doing all these sacrifices with all these animals. So they complain about not having meat, yet they got animals. Now some Christians are going to say that, well, that was their livelihood, so they would not have consumed their animals. But they're walking through the wilderness. What do they need money for? Then some other Christians will say that because they have been in Egypt for so long that they venerated the cow, and so they would not have eaten the cow. But they had sheep and they had goats. Sheep and goats. You still had meat. So they complain and saying, "God, we don't have any meat. We don't have any meat. Please give us meat." God, Yahweh, El, hears their cries. And he becomes jealous. He becomes angry. He becomes angry. He becomes emotionally displaced because he hears them crying about the fact that when they was in Egypt, they had, leeks and onions and garlic and meat. And so he gets angry with them. And instead of being a loving deity that has patience and recognize that these people have been going through a slave mentality, and they're still in that slave mentality because they've only been out for a minute. Now, you've been in so-called, theoretically, according to this book, you've been in captivity for over 200 years in Egypt, and then an extra 200 plus years that you were just living in Egypt, that these people wouldn't have the mentality of the Egyptian people. I mean, come on, let's be real. Every person that's been growing up in a previously colonized country or in enslavement, you still have the mentality of those who enslaved you or colonized you. That's a natural thing. These people have been separated. You would think this deity would have the love and compassion and understanding and the patience to which that's what love is supposed to be, to recognize this. And then, of course, in this book, I'm sure that at this point, instead of venting his anger, this God is going to say, "You know what? I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to make sure that everything looks good. I'm going to give you plenty of meat. I'm going to give you plenty of water. I'm going to take you on into the promised land that I said I was going to give you. I'm not going to be the bad dad that takes you on a road trip from Washington State all the way to Miami in the dead of winter and only let you eat bread and water the whole journey, but promise you great things in Miami. No, I'm going to take care of you the whole trip." Of course, this God is not that person, right? Hell to the no. Hell to the no. Instead, this God says that, "You know what? I'm going to give you so much meat." He Brewster Milligan them jokers. "I'm going to give you so much meat until it's pouring out of your nostrils. You're going to be sick of meat because you talking about you brought us out of Egypt and you just forgetting all about me." So here's the ridiculousness. This God causes, and I am not exaggerating, when you read this book, and if you do the math, he creates a minimum of 1.14 trillion dead quails in about a 5 to 12 mile radius, diameter of the camp. It said that for a day's walk, there was quail 2 cubits, which is about 3 feet high, of dead quails that this God brought from the sea to the people, and that each man collected 10, at minimum 10 homers, which is about 1,900 quails. 475 pounds was the least that somebody collected out of the 600,000 men that they account for. Imagine in your mind, 5 miles from wherever you are, of 3 feet high, dead quail. 1.14 trillion quail. That's what your God's solution was to the people complaining. I'm going to give you so many quails, you ain't going to know what to do with yourself. And then, for the test de resistance, once they start eating the quail, he sent the plague to kill all the people that complained that they didn't have no meat. Such a loving, loving God. Such a loving, loving God. And I know that many preachers preach this, and the ones who are bold enough to use this for a sermon, they say that this was a test of obedience and faith. They didn't have the faith in God, and so he punished them. This faith has nothing to do with this. You got people in the middle of the wilderness. All you giving them is some bread. They're hungry. They're frustrated. They're starving. So they're agitated. And all they said was, we want some meat. We got meat around us that we're not eating for some reason, but we want some meat. And just because they complain, you say it's a test of their faith. This is why those preachers will tell you that when you're going through a suffering, don't complain. You can't complain to God. You can't say nothing to God. But in that same text, Moses was complaining to God. Who am I? I didn't birth none of these kids. I didn't birth these nations. Why am I carrying all their burden? This is bullshit. Basically what Moses was arguing to God about. And God said he had a solution. You know what? I'm going to bring 70. I'm going to spread out the burden onto all 70. I got you, Moses. So he got Moses, who questioned him a lot. But the people get mad about the fact they don't have no meat. I think this story was written just as a way to show how vicious this guy can be, and to make people fall under the spell that you can't say nothing about what this guy does to you at all. Because the moment you say something about it, you're complaining. And as soon as you complain, then you're being disrespectful to this God. He brought you out of slavery, so you should be happy regardless of what he gives you. Bullshit. Don't bring me out of a bad situation and put me into another bad situation. If you're not bringing me into a good situation, then I have no need of you. It's like when you meet those people who go from bad relationship to bad relationship. They keep putting themselves in bad relationships. They keep finding and dating the same person over and over and over and over and over again. I know I did that for a minute, but they keep dating the same person over and over again. Find themselves in a bad situation. You got to change it. Change the way things are going. And if you're believing in a God that his only way of satisfying the people when they complain about something is to send a plague on them and to first overfeed them to the point where it becomes disgusting to them, and then send a plague on them and kill those people who complain, that is a narcissistic control freak. That is someone who wants to put you in Stockholm Syndrome, and many of you are in Stockholm Syndrome, but you can free yourself from that by recognizing that this is not a true representation of any good deity, and you should walk away from it. But for those who have, I applaud you. But that was on the live today. Join us on Facebook every morning, 10:30 and around 10:30 to 10:45 on Facebook. Why I Left Religion with Coach Renz. Actually, if you look for the link, it's facebook.com/Coach Renz 33. But follow us on Facebook. Join us for our lives. We have great communication. And about an hour after we finish the lesson, the conversation goes into many different directions. But join us Monday through Friday, and we have a great time. But always remember, you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibration.